Well, we're back for another episode of Things Hidden. And this is a super Things Hidden show because we've got double things hidden on tap today. Because our guest is the director of the upcoming documentary on Rene Girard's life titled Things Hidden, Sam Sorich. How you doing?
I'm doing good, David. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you. Now, where in the world did you possibly get that title idea?
Yeah, it was just there for the taking. So no, I remember. Did you remember this? You called me on the phone probably in 2017 or something like that. You're like, "Oh, I hear you're doing a documentary. What are you gonna call it?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm thinking about calling it Things Hidden." And I think it was right around the time you started your podcast. So there's some twin great minds think
Yeah,
alike. So, yeah.
yeah. Well, we've been you know keeping tabs on what's going to happen with that film project for it's been a while, and I I think that what you're doing here is important work. We started this work here in 2015, and at the time, Rene Girard, you couldn't find anything about him online except for Wikipedia and a couple obscure blogs, and there's a few videos on YouTube, but there really wasn't anything going on, and I decided at that point that if I'm going to do a podcast articulating his ideas, I'm not going to, a lot of times, how it goes with the online world. People want to try to take an idea and try to make it into a guru and that they're the new guru for something or whatever. But I said, we've got to emphasize this person behind the ideas as well, not just take the ideas and take them off and try to commercialize them and commodify them and turn them into something more mass friendly. This man was a great man himself, and his personality is, in kind of, as they say in theological circles, theology is always autobiographical, and you've got to really, see this man too, along for the ride as you learn about mimetic theory. And so that's kind of what your project does. A really great job. I was able to see it, and I enjoyed the peek behind the curtain of Rene Girard's private life and his personal life, and his journey to getting his book "Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World" um, out, and some of the other texts along the way, like "Violence and the Sacred." So, first of all, tell me about, I guess, the general question a lot of people ask, but we'll go ahead and do it. Why did you want to make this movie? Was it a similar line of thought?
Yeah, no, I think it's yeah, you hit the nail on the head because I think at the same time I was looking around after Gerard died in 2015, there's a lot of obituaries and everything, but there wasn't any like real good video on him. There were a lot of interviews, radio interviews. Um, there was that great like BBC interview that he or CBC interview that he did that I listened to 100 times, but
Yeah.
not having like a documentary was like a real gap. And being interested in Gerard and being a filmmaker, it was just kind of like the right idea, and I knew that it would be the next project that I took on. So um and you're right too that I was interested in the ideas, but I was also interested in of like who could come up with these ideas. So interested in the man himself, and that also drove the project because I didn't want to separate those things where it was just a biography um and then you didn't get too much into the theory, or if it was just the theory and it was too didactic. Like I really thought there was some drama there in the story. And so that was like definitely a delicate balance throughout the whole thing because at the same time he's like his life was pretty dry and sedate because he was a professor and he's reading books or writing or typing, and that's not very exciting. But obviously he's in this mode for prolonged periods of his life where he is teaching and discovering, and he's like an adventurer. He's going to he's some type of like time traveler because he's going back to um, the earliest days of humanity and then projecting into the future of apocalyptic, the end of the world time.
Yeah, you
And
didn't quite stylize him as Indiana Jones, but he had a journey, definitely.
exactly. No, yeah, he had a hero's journey, and so that helps as a filmmaker. You can kind of hit the beats, and that's why it makes it accessible to a wide audience. So that's what we're seeing is like, yeah, there's that version that people give you of Girard where they kind of corner you at a cocktail party and kind of like, hey, your minds can be blown. The story, this guy's theory, and then you go into it and you have to like make all these like gymnastic moves of how to bring it all together. So my project was to, I spent I guess like probably 4 years full time doing all those gymnastic moves to
Yeah.
tell the story, but making it try to be effortless, and that's why it's digestible, and you don't need to be a scholar um, to get there to understand the theory. It could be understood by anyone.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not a scholar either, so I'm just a filmmaker, and so I kind of took the project from this artistic eye, which is like get your subject. Your task is to paint a portrait, and that portrait doesn't need to be everything. It doesn't need to. Um, it can just be a sketch, and then you. I guess that's what's the most interesting to me is kind of like the artist's journey alongside when you're making art. You're becoming you have a relationship to your subject, and my subject was Rene Girard, and it really changed me because I got to have a relationship with Rene because I've never met him in life, but I had this archival footage, and I had to see his face every day for 7 years, and when I started the film. So I feel like um yeah, that the relationship of the artist to its subject is a really beautiful one. And so I've gotten to spend time with this with this person, and and tell the story also through try to get out of the way. Whereas like every part of the film is supposed to be some type of essence that Gerard is on screen, that he's telling the story, and it is his story.
Yeah. And you interviewed a lot of his family members and friends, his wife, and longtime colleagues and so forth. What was something that you learned or took away about Gerard that changed your perspective of him after going through the filming process? Prior, you were kind of a fan, and then you take on the subject and meet all these people, and what was not left in the film or whatever. What it was your overall, change of thought or anything that maybe changed your perspective about him?
Yeah, I would say let me go back and just kind of give like why I was interested at first, and kind of give my little bio. Where so I grew up in a big Catholic family. I'm one of 11 kids, and I was always very artistic, like drawing. Like most of my childhood, before I can remember, I was always making art and drawing. My best friend grew up down the street from me, and we started skateboarding and took his dad's camera, started making short films out of that. And that at a very early age, it was always this like that my free time was spent making films and telling stories and crafting film. And I had a reconversion to my faith in high school, and it it was kind of like this 180 experience because I was going on this like artistic track. I was in theater and wanted to do film full time. I had a scholarship to the Art Institute in Chicago, and after I had this religious experience, um, it 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 kind of posed the question of like what are all these gifts for? What are my talents for? And it took the form of kind of like a calling to the priesthood. So I went to seminary for 3 years, and it was the largest Catholic seminary, undergrad seminary in the United States at the time. So it was up in Minnesota, and the first year was great, um, but after 2 more years in that, the kind of desire to be a priest, um, and kind of what that meant in that world was very jarring for me. I felt like I couldn't. Uh, in order to be a priest, I had to give up my personality, that I had to conform to this version of Catholicism that was, I think, just too shocking coming from my background. I couldn't watch the films that I liked. I couldn't listen to the music that I liked. I couldn't speak truthfully or honestly about things that I thought were just real. And so I kind of became an atheist during that time, and I was really looking for truth, and I took a one way trip to Europe and started just reading books, and I brought along Rene Girard and Nietzsche and William James, and then also Simone Weil. So like
When was
this,
this?
what when was this?
Yeah.
This was in 2000 um 11 maybe. And yeah, so it was like this very fertile time of my formation where I was pursuing and I guess Simone Weil had a big influence on me because she pursues she pursues truth without knowing where that's going to take her, but like kind of like with a fundamental faith that she'll arrive uh, to Christianity or to Christ, but that's not her methodology of seeking the truth. So she stays outside the church, maybe her whole life, and but she has this mystical experience, and basically that truth seeking and meaning seeking undergirds it, and it's like this very robust and what's the word, like it's very demanding. I mean for her, and so I felt like I could pursue truth um, wherever it took me. And if that was through atheism, if that was through whatever, that would be better for my soul ultimately, if I had a soul. I don't know. So, but Gerard, coming across Gerard, um, he spoke in a way that confirmed my faith and my initial faith, but in a way that I could continue to seek truth wherever it led me. So. Um, I went back to college. I studied philosophy at Illinois State University, and I just remember reading The Scapegoat, and I was just I had just been broken up with by someone, so I had all this like free time. I was reading till like 3 a.m. every night, and one day, yeah, one night, I hear this commotion outside, and I had the window open because it was like really hot, and I kind of open up the window a little more, and there's all these like cars honking, all these college students like swarming onto the campus and yelling, and so like I'm listening, like what is this? What's going on? And then someone says like Osama bin Laden's dead,
Hmm.
and I'm literally reading The Scapegoat by Rene Girard, and I'm doing double takes from the page to the campus outside, and that was like when it like really sunk in that this is a lens that I could view real life things that maybe no one else was thinking about. So and again, like to your point, like there wasn't a lot of resources. Now there's a lot more resources, but it was kind of like that lonely journey. And so my project came at the right time where yeah, there wasn't a documentary, and now there is.
That's good. And it's something that, you know, needs to be captured in cinema and different arts to express what is fundamentally a guy who's into the humanities. You know, humanities need to pick up the pace. The field of humanities needs to really engage his art and express itself. You know, because what he did was a kind of art in some sense. You know, but I mean, there's a science to it. But um,
Yeah, I always thought he was always commenting on art. He's just commenting on storytelling.
yeah,
And like not many artists know Gerard. And I think like yeah, yeah, I think more artists can benefit from Gerard and really get what drama is all about, but also like yeah, what's the point of art? Why are we telling stories to begin with? Um, and then also like the artist's life where there's all these like pitfalls that you can fall into, um, like any industry that you're in, like how not to fall into mimetic pitfalls with your peers, and yeah, kind of live a singular life without getting envious or trapped into kind of rivalrous things that is so prevalent in artistic circles and filmmaking circles.
so what was something that you did? Was there something you learned or changed your mind about with Renee after you did the movie project?
Um, Yeah, so I didn't really I mean, yeah, I mean, uh what do they say, like fools rush in where angels fear to tread. I didn't know what I would expect when starting the journey. And I probably didn't know too much of the theory. Like I still had to catch up reading the books and that. So that took a long time to really grasp what was going on. So my early interviews are really basic questions, but it also and so that's good because the people answering the questions could kind of answer in these like simple ways that people could get. But on the other end, it had no shape to it. So that's why the project took so long. Is because I there was like a learning curve that I had to go along with. So it was really just like that probably like, good 10 years of like getting into Girard and going deeper and deeper into Girard and still being shocked. Like anytime I pick up something by Girard, I'm surprised how powerful it still is. That I could read a sentence and like ruminate on it or meditate on it, because it's still giving insight into my daily life.
Mhm.
Trying to think of specifics, like I think I just bring this into any relationship that I'm in that I can kind of see the shape of maybe where my or like for instance, like if there's someone in my peer group that is doing well in their filmmaking career, like how do I how do I not be stung by that, knowing that I'm on a journey and where I want to be isn't there yet, and maybe it's like giving up that desire to be there at all. So in very simple ways, but also very deep ways, taking inventory of one's desires can release you of these like fantasies of grandiosity or all this stuff. So yeah, it's just everyday thing for me.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes Girard's ideas so hard to become more mainstream and mass consumer friendly is because they, to the extent that they're powerful, it's to the extent that they're shining a light on the revelation of the gospel. And when you shine a light on the gospel in a different angle than people are used to having, it'll hit you like a ton of bricks, and it will be able to kind of force you to reckon with yourself and your ego and whatever else false layers of identity you put on yourself. So that's the kind of idea. That's the kind of idea that is not quite sticky because people don't want to self-examine, and most ideologies or most philosophies or most scientific discoveries do not involve the subjective experience of trying to like look at yourself in a more humble and humility-driven approach.
Yeah.
And his theory, when properly reckoned with, does that because it's not his power. He's just looking at the point of the biblical, you know, what I call the gospel technology. The gospel technology allows you to see things in a different light. It allows you to see your culture, allows you to see yourself, and it kind of confronts you with this challenge to change your whole behavior. And that's one of the things that when I interviewed Jordan Peterson on the day of his book release, which 12 Rules for Life, a big seller, and I was in New York City. He had just done Fox and Friends, and I was a second interview on the day of his book release. It was quite an honor. I mean, here we
Yeah,
are,
yeah.
and they invited me up there. Let's go. So I go there, and I was trying to present, and I let him tell his story, but I wanted to show, like a naive kind of guy, a student of ideas. I wanted to show, hey, look at the similarities between what you've done and what Rene Girard has done, but look at how we need to think about this more from an anthropological, concrete imitation rather than the Carl Jung framework, which makes Christ just an archetype in the dream world.
Yeah.
And he didn't quite get it, and people
But that was
comment this.
how many years ago was that? Because now it's been a while. He's surrounded by at least some Gerard friendly people. And I did see him comment one time, like he says, someone brings up Gerard and he says, a lot of people have been talking to me about Gerard. And that's all he said. Like it's very
Yeah,
cryptic. So
yeah,
it'd be nice to get like just some type of criticism from
yeah,
him. Do you
yeah.
know what's going on?
That was in 2015 when I did the interview, the day of his book release. So
Right.
2015, but it was December, I think, December 2015. 2015. I mean, um, but yeah, what the point? My point is to say that when you have a psychological uh, theory of Christ, it doesn't demand as much confrontation with your actions
Yeah.
as an anthropological revelation found in Scripture, right? Because you still have to, the emphasis in mythology tends to be to deny the bodily, corporeal, fleshly reality of what's happening, and that's something that Girard was very good at because I liked Jung in college and stuff, and I still have some. I still think there's some interesting stuff to look at there, but it's not nearly as important as I used to have it because Girard gets us to focus on, and he even criticized Joseph Campbell, the other big dog in popular mythology sense making, and he says, they're talking about all of these things like this ritual here of two 15-year-old kids put in a shack, and then all of a sudden there's bayonets going into the shack, and there's this whole ritual where they survive and come out alive, and they're over there focused on, look at this symbolizes the seasons, and it symbolizes this type of thing and that thing. He's like, but look at the elephant in the room is you just killed somebody, you just murdered somebody, but you don't really want to focus on the importance of that and how common that is across cultures that don't interact with one another. And so Girard is kind of like a prophet in that sense, like an intellectual prophet, because he's saying, hey, wait a second, let's not intellectualize this to the point where we get nothing but noise. The signal here in the noise is this common pattern of murdering real flesh and blood people. Let's examine why we do that. Why would we do that? And that's
Yeah.
so important, right? So he's kind of like a detective,
Hmm.
like G.K. Chesterton's Father Brown series. He's like this detective, but he's got this kind of gospel prophetic haunting to his text, especially his older books. The more he goes on with, you know, examining everything, including modern culture and so forth. But
Yeah, yeah, he's a realist, and he says that the violence is real. And yeah, I like the idea of Gerard as a detective. That was like some type of motif that I was playing with early on. And it's hard not to like thematize all your motifs into like, but you do have to choose something as a filmmaker stylistically to tell the story. And that's super appropriate for Gerard as like almost like as Oedipus was a detective, looking at his own story.
yeah,
Gerard has some parallels there.
yeah. I remember I called up what I thought was his office number, but it turned out to be his home number, and I got his wife, and or it sound I later figured out by the voice and everything.
Yeah,
But I said, oh, looking, I didn't know at the time that he was in such bad health. So
sure.
I was calling, trying to see if I could set up an interview with him. He was still alive at the time, and he said, "Oh no, that time has passed now. I'm
I
so
see.
sorry." And that was the closest I got to trying. I was trying to, try to meet this man. I didn't know.
Yeah,
Later learned that he had been in poor health for some time, but he was
yeah,
up there in age. Um, but all I bring that up just to point out that there's so many questions I still have that I'd love to ask him, and so many things I'd love to see. I always say that, he passes in 2015, and I always say it's like as soon as he died, God let him write some of the storylines for world affairs for the next several years.
jeez,
You
yeah,
know what I mean? Because you had that Paris shooting happen the day he dies.
yeah, yeah,
Just total sacrificial, horrible thing.
yeah.
The terrorist attack, and then you have the 2016 election, you have the global pandemic, you've got the
January 6th, October
yeah,
7th.
January
Yeah,
6th, and I always like to comment on some of the things that I thought, you know, I think it's stuff that I think Girard would say, which is you look at something like January 6th and look at how toothless and defanged our modern form of a Spartacus revolution looks like. Ramal's taking photos.
yeah,
That's if I said, if that's what we call an insurrection, go look at what the Roman Empire would see as an insurrection
right.
and look at the difference and then tell me what was the cultural force that made what we call now a violent insurrection so defanged and toothless by comparison. It's the gospel technology that Girard's identifying. It's this cultural effect. that's demystifying and defanging our appetite for savage violence. But yet it continues to persist, right? That's the problem with our appetite for violence is we always find more sterile and bureaucratic forms of force to invoke our wrath back into the picture of things.
Yeah, I'd like to say too that yeah, not having met Renee, um well, you brought up Martha too, so I just want to take the time to like say like how gracious she was, and all the people that I want to thank too. The that should be thanked in talking about the film. So like the Raven Foundation, there were two other sponsors, like Steve Barry was the filmmaker who shot the footage that's in the film.
Yeah.
Sherwood Belangia was a big donor to the film, and friend of Rene and Girard scholar. So yeah, just tons of people behind the film that are this film wouldn't be made without them. So my many thanks to them. And then
Okay.
also to your point about not meeting Girard because um yeah, they're um basically part of the project too is like there's this archival part to it where all these people who knew him in life, and some of them are passed away now, like it is this like last glimpse at this historic figure. I think that's what's also important about the movie. Um, there there are people that are surrounded by him that speak about him fondly or about him critically. So I try to kind of paint this mosaic of diversity. So there probably could have been more more of that, but uh, there were some limitations to it. And then our generation is, um, I guess I just wanted to say, like, I felt Gerard's presence throughout the whole thing, like being so close to him as a subject, and then kind of needing his guidance. And it kind of sounds kind of woo woo, but it's also like really real, really palatable. Um, and I had a very I would call it like a conscious expanding experience while making the movie. And so there was this level of spirituality to it that I didn't that surprised me, and that was kind of life changing. So like whatever happens with the film, I really point to that as being
Is
the
there a particular event in mind that you're talking about, or are you just saying over the process?
yeah, there was an event. And I'm kind
Are
of
you able to share it, or is it something you don't want to
I
share?
kind of want to share it because I feel like before I had this experience, I would have not said it was real. But the more I kind of like had to like unpack what happened, I realized that happens to a lot of people, and so it's not like this. It shouldn't be like a private thing. Um, Meaning that, so yeah, I was it was towards the end of the movie of the process of making the movie. I had this deadline uh, in November of 2023 when I had to show the film at the Novatate conference. And so I was working on the film with Trevor. I was working 19-hour days for like a month and a half. So I'd go to bed at 4 and I'd wake up at 10 just because the shape of the movie wasn't it needed all that work, and editing is very like um a, a very time intensive thing. So I was over caffeinated trying to stay awake. I was kind of like in the zone a lot of times, so kind of like in a flow state a lot of times in order just to meet this deadline. And the so we had finished the film, but it was like this last chunk of the movie, and it was this scene after we get through or after we get through battling to the end, and where do you kind of land? How do you end the movie? How do you what needs to be said? And I always wanted to end with Peter's denial, which for me was the reading in the book The Scapegoat that Girard wrote in 85 that showed me that he was a master interpreter of the Bible, like more than I had ever read. And so it was Peter's denial that I wanted to crown the movie. And but it wasn't fitting. It was too long. Like I didn't want to have cuts in it, and but I worked on it for several weeks, and it just wasn't working. So I go downstairs. I'm kind of in despair. I'm sitting with my wife outside, and she's like, "You've been like working too hard." you need to you need to just end the movie because there's no more time, and to make this deadline. And so I kind of like give it up. I had another version of it, and I was like, okay, I just have to like let go and finish the film. And so there was some type of release to that. And I go back upstairs and I just want to try it one more time. So I put on my headphones and just start working it again. And I have this insight that, oh, I can use some of the footage from the beginning of the movie, put it at the end. It'll make this nice bookmark kind of like um, aesthetically. And I did it, and it was really beautiful. Like I'd finished the movie after 7 years. I had this like cathartic process in the content of it being Peter's denial, all that, what that meant to me sentimentally, um, and just but also just as the film structurally, I thought it was beautiful and it struck me, and so I started crying. I was crying for many reasons that I finished the film after all these years and I didn't have to work so hard. I could actually rest. And uh, all of a sudden, I'm just sitting at my desk and I feel my consciousness doing something. It was expanding, and I felt an angel appeared in my imagination holding two cups like this, pouring water back and forth, and I was like really shocked by it. Like I was already in this state of like um, cathartic release. But when this happened, it was uh, like it 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 intensified it. And so now there's this thing in my imagination that I can't not look at. And so I tried not to look at it. And I'm looking down, I'm like, is this real? Is this real? What is going on? What's happening? But it won't go away. It's not, I couldn't get rid of it. And so I decided to engage it or to put my attention to it. And so I'm looking at this thing that's not of me because well, it's both of me and not of me. It's in my imagination, but it's not a space that I had all my faculties. I could doubt it. I could think about it. I could not think about it, like, or I can engage it. And when I engaged it, it was just there and it was beautiful. And I understood that the water was Christ, just the everlasting water of Christ. So it wasn't an image of Christ, but the experience was that this is a gift that was communicating a Christic image in the form of water, but also this angel. And so it was very, very peaceful, beautiful. It stayed in my like for the next 2 weeks, I could bring it to mind like a memory. And so it was like this. And it was the same day that I learned that my second son was going to be born. So I named my second son Cassiel,
Wow.
which I learned through this process that this angel is this the image of the angel pouring two cups is the angel of temperance in iconography, in Christian iconography, but also the tarot tradition. So this was kind of freaking me out because as a Catholic, you can't pay any attention to the tarot tradition. And so but more importantly, it was the angel of temperance. So what is temperance? Like, so I just it says nothing about the state of my soul other than I need temperance in my life. And so it's been a daily meditation ever since. It was kind of like this definitely it definitely understood that spirituality was real and that consciousness is weird, but that everyone has access to this, um, that the content of consciousness is also Christic, or it could be understood this way. Like there's something very, very beautiful about what the human being is, and so I'm actually it brought me a lot of hope in these times, that and I guess that's why I'm talking about it now too, because I think it does bring hope. It's not I, I don't know, like there's yeah, there's availability to this and this type of narrative and understanding reality. That's beyond the material existence, but also beyond our violent narratives. And so that's why I think it had this. When I said that Girard was close to me during this time, I associated that gift experience with the gift of being with Girard for that long. What does that do to the person when you kind of meditate on his work? There's a transformative experience, and and yeah, so I'm very grateful about that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very, very compelling story. I wanted to bring up 2 points. I think at near the end of the movie, you kind of focused on an interview with a gentleman who was one of his colleagues. I forget his name right now, the older man, but he says that the point of Girard's life was he was humble, right? And
Yeah.
I thought that was a really great way to end the movie, which goes along with Temperance, right? And this idea of humility. Um, Another couple highlights I enjoyed is the sense that uh, Jean Michel and Rene were working on things hidden, and he's Jean Michel's been on our shows few different times over the years,
Yeah.
and he's always a quite a character and fun to talk to. But you got the sense from the telling of it. It felt kind of like, and the way you presented it, like you took an idea. They're writing a book, and you made it feel kind of like like the discovery of the personal computer in the garage of the Apple founders. Like
Right, right,
we're
right, right.
founding something, we're working on it all through the night, and it's a
Yeah.
marathon, and
Yeah.
finally we had it ready to go. And that I thought that was a cool way to present an intellectual work like that. Like it's not just it's not a place of the mind. There's an incarnational experience when you're tapping into truths that are so important and earth shattering. I mean, these are things that are hidden since the foundation of the world, and God is revealing them through history, right? And that's a wonderful thing. Um,
What I like
Also,
about that
go
is
ahead.
that it involved like a friendship. Like it wasn't just Renee in a vacuum thinking these things up. I'm sure a lot of the time it may have felt like that, but there are people around him. He's not an isolated figure. There are colleagues. There's his family. There's all these people around him influencing him, giving him feedback, and he can't finish Things Hidden without Jean-Michel in a way, in a sense. I don't want to overstate that, but um, having people around you and around him was necessary. Um, and yeah, and for even for me, like during making the film, like I needed Trevor, I needed my wife, I needed all these people around me, and it's not a singular effort. And that's something that we can remember to in craft making and soul making. And
Yeah. Another part I really enjoyed, I think it was my favorite part, was the part where he goes to Paris. I don't want to spoil this stuff, so if you want me to take it out, I can. But
I know you can.
I don't know, I don't know your philosophy to filmmaking, but and he has that moment where he gets his big book out, and he's got all these he gets a little bit of a media run on television in France, but they're kind of tepid in their response to him, because now he's really talking about the primacy of the gospels in and unfolding his insights. And they're kind of it's kind of a it doesn't really hit home as well and compelling for the avant-garde and the intellectual circles in the 70s there, right? When that book comes, is it the 70s or 80s at that when
Yes,
things yeah. So but there's a point there that I thought you said that was very well. I mean, that you encapsulated him saying that basically, what's the point? It's just a book, doesn't really matter. It's just a trivial thing. What unpack what that mindset was like, because that's something that we don't see displayed in intellectuals, biographies, right? You see that a lot with, like the movies about the Wright brothers or that type of movie where, man, we failed again. We just must give up. This is not going to work. But when it comes to pouring your life into this powerful breakthrough insight about what the Bible's all about, and then feeling like, well, what's the point? It doesn't really come to anything in the grand scheme of things. It's very Solomon Ecclesiastes like moment. But tell us a little bit about that.
yeah. I think it's a nice point where yeah, people can interpret it many different ways. I think he's being honest that what is motivating you? How does he get up in the morning and um like keep grinding basically? How does he put all this time and energy into it? How is that even possible? And it's probably through a possibility of that balance that he had in life, where if you're too ambitious, if you're too obsessed with fame and recognition, it could destroy you. And there's probably stories around that we didn't include, but like basically the um I I also thought just in a storytelling perspective, like when the hero gets what he wants, he has to pay something, um, and he has to learn something, and uh, the hero in the story, I think we get this glimpse into Gerard's mindset at the time, which was like, yeah, it was never about, it was simply about that. He had such an intellectual curiosity and pleasure of just doing the puzzle that once the puzzle was done, uh, it wasn't as good as the journey. You know, it wasn't good as solving the puzzle. Um, and because there's higher order things,
Yeah.
and probably his, you know, he said like after writing Things Hidden, he could die. Like he felt like he could die. His life's goal was complete.
That's what
So
my
it,
my friend, who's a co-host for my show, Dr. Yu, he discovered a unified theory of physics, and he said the same exact thing. He said once I felt that, I felt like I could just die now. My life was complete, and that's a nice feeling. But hopefully, it doesn't come too soon for some of us if we get to have a long life and healthy, happy life. But that's an interesting. That must be an interesting feeling. And do you, correct me if my memory is incorrect, but was he bitter when he wrote that, or what was the deal? Because he didn't get much sale. What was the trigger that made him feel that existential? Well, what's the point? Was it the lack of support? Was it the way the intellectuals of France were kind of like, okay, this is weird? I mean, what was
yeah,
the
I don't know if I took it as what's the point, although there's probably a mix of all that and like
yeah
it's probably that yeah, he wanted to be recognized like all of us. He wants the truth to
yeah
be known. He wants his peers to he wants to be involved. But at the same time, like I think he well if it's true that what should be recognized about Gerard is that he's humble, is that he was actually humble, that he didn't he let those things go. He didn't care so much about it, and he understood his achievement, and others did around him. I'm sure there's always a tension there, but I think he and again this is probably just projecting, but like if you look at just the trajectory of it, of the subject matter, of like how deep these things go into the soul, um, if he if he walked the walk, you know, good for him, and that's in that way he's a model of his theory being united with the person, and I choose to believe
yeah.
that.
Every hero character has a character flaw. Did you see one when you were capturing his story? I mean, I know we're dealing with a real life person. Everybody's a sinner, but the point
Yeah,
is, what was there something that you kind of felt was his stumbling block in his journey, or was it, or maybe it's that tension between wanting to be go down as a great man of history, but also wanting to tell the truth, right? I mean, is
yeah,
that what it, I don't know if he wanted to go down as a great man of history, but people kind of wanted him to. And I can imagine that that would be very seductive to you when you get a little flock of fans of various reputations and fields of scholarship and all over the world, and they start treating you like you're the Copernicus of our time. I can imagine it's very tempting to kind of fall. Well, maybe it is. Maybe that is what I'm supposed to be. But do you think maybe that was his temptation throughout the project, or what? Or maybe
yeah,
just
for
boredom
sure.
with the academia?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's definitely one. I also think that what I also wanted to capture was his workaholism, and that was probably necessary in order to achieve what he did. But he had to he yeah, the hero has to pay, and it costs something to do that. And so I wanted to capture that with Martin Gerard's kind of presence in the movie. He's both the narrator in the movie, but he also has this sticking point that kind of all sons have to their father, which is, you know, hold them to the flame. And like, uh, you're teaching us how to be good, and you have to be good yourself. Like you have to. Um, so yeah, in the film, there's this moment where Martin is saying like, yeah, he wasn't there, as much as he could have been. And I wanted that also to be a warning to myself because that's the type of thing that I can fall into if I'm working. I definitely fell into it when I was working on this film, and it's something I have to take a hard look in the mirror and like what kind of father do I want to be? What kind of filmmaker do I want to be? Is what's worth it in the end? So I think it's
We
also
don't want our things hidden to include our fatherhood, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Well,
think yeah,
that's the, that's just the nature of the balance of people. It's hard to know. So many people who do great things, whether it's an intellectual project or politician or a builder or something or whatever,
yeah.
that they end up sacrificing a lot of closeness to their kids, right? And that can cause some some pain and some reverberations that can be a challenge for people.
I think there is redemption for that story too, though. So Martin obviously is the narrator of it. He wasn't involved in in like the in Gerard's theory while Rene was alive. So now that after Rene passed and Martha's getting older, it's kind of fallen on Martin to kind of like get back into his father's work. So I think there is a story there, that yeah, that there's some type of redemption that he saw his own mimetic rivalry with his dad and needed some healing from that. I don't want to speak too much into that, but I think it's pretty clear that his involvement now to be involved with the even be involved with the film and to give his time and energy to that, like I
Does he
think it's
have any,
there's a turn there.
has he expressed any desire to kind of to contribute to the idea part of it, or just the books? I know he's
No,
done some audio books,
yeah,
readings of his dad's books.
yeah, exactly. I think he just wants to make it accessible and yeah, he sees his role of in the in there are still people trying to know about Rene Girard and he sees himself as a conduit to that, I
I
think.
think he's going to be, and others have said it similarly, that he's going to be one of the most intellectual, like, giants of the 21st century. So, in terms of his ideas, hopefully catching hold and being used appropriately for good, they can be used for bad, and they often are. And those ideas are not, in other words, monopolized by him. People have a intuitive understanding of mimetic desire. If you're in advertising or propaganda or any of these types of principalities that are using those principles very effectively, whether they know about Girard or not. And I think for people to challenge propaganda and challenge tyranny in the 21st century, they're going to have to, Girard actually provides a kind of, like the prince for Machiavelli, he provides a kind of similar counterweight for the people, I mean, to be able to unpack the ways in which they are hoodwinked into false paradigms of truth because of their mimetic aura, whether it be in health or nutrition or medicine and war propaganda, all those things. There's so much practical utility. I mean, again, just for your daily life, but people on this show expect current events, and it's very helpful for understanding current events and unpacking real world news making as mythology, as a kind of vestige of mythology in real time is something we do. I mean, there's so much legs to these tools that God has inspired Girard to help us kind of encapsulate and build on and take further and go deeper. And so that's great, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hope the documentary too, because of its format, it's infinitely shareable. Like it can be disseminated worldwide. So, and as much as these ideas are relevant and helpful, I think we're kind of like at a critical mass where, yeah, that Gerard can be a household name. I already think his ideas are without being credited to him. Like
Yeah.
he didn't come up with mimetic desire or the scapegoat mechanism. Those were phenomena in the world that he saw and can articulate. And I think people are already using these terminologies, even if they don't know where they come from. So I think the documentary just gives it that historical context and that narrative that this is a person that we can emulate into as a how to respond to the violence
Yeah.
of our world and how to respond to the gospel.
It's ironic too from a biographical standpoint. It's something I don't think you talk too much about in this movie, but how much Girard was part of the launch of the French invasion and intellectuals, the
Yeah,
academia, and John Hopkins University, the university he put together that had all these critical theorists kind of make their big debut in the American Academy circles. And he
yeah,
was a guy that put that conference together. And it's ironic to me because I feel like mimetic theory provides the intellectual toolkit to take on some of these woke ideologies and critical theory that have gone mad that his contemporaries put together, and it's so kind of poetic justice that I can't think of a better intellectual toolkit to kind of temper some of those ideologies impact and control over people's minds in the world today. So I think that's so interesting.
Well, yeah, there'll definitely be some deleted scenes. We had a good 20 minutes talking about that. And I went into the archives to find him speaking at those conferences and stuff like that. In fact, that was the funnest part of the movie, but it just was too long, too in the weeds. So eventually I'll come out with that. I thought it was a good segment in the
Like a
film.
bonus short or something.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, to your point of like, um, I guess the temptation is like not, and you're not saying this because you use the right word to temper things. It's
Yeah.
like for me, it's that Girard can be used as a weapon on the left and the right, but it's like, and this is what he's pointing out how doubles become mirror images of each other, and it's either when you're critiquing someone, if it's the left or the right, you can't then become the mirror ideology of that thing. So how do you do that? It's very, very difficult. And maybe Girard gives us the words to first not fall into that trap, but then to like pull back and yeah, I don't know. It's a very difficult thing, but it's maybe yeah. That's my meditation on temperance is like just not not non-action in some sense,
Yeah.
letting go. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's important because everybody has this silence, this violence, anger. If you're not with me, you're against me. And Gerard counters that with be careful who your enemies are because you'll become like them. And that's like, oh, whoa, uh-oh. That really is a slap in the face to these kind of self-righteous zeal that ideologies can give people. I want to land the plane with let you tell us where we can look for the film and watch the trailer and all that. But before that, I want to ask, what's your advice for people who want to be filmmakers or young filmmakers or whatever, or old filmmakers who haven't been able to see their dreams come to fruition? You've obviously worked on this a long time and had a lot of challenges and setbacks and wilderness moments. It sounds like, from 17 to 24, it's a long time, and you got it out. So that's great. And it'll be out soon. And, um, what's your advice from a mimetic theory influence standpoint or just, real world experience in this day and age to get a project out? Because it's not, making a documentary about high concept ideas is not a lucrative idea, I can imagine,
Yeah.
Neither is doing a podcast, by the way. But
Yeah, no, that you have other motivations. Like what drives the work art is a bigger picture, and I think that's just it. Is like if you're a young filmmaker, it's easy to be caught in the wind of the current trend in filmmaking or whatever it is. But it's kind of saying like our desire is contagious, so be careful of that contagious effect on you, and then be careful what you end your attention on, um, meaning that uh, whatever you get good at or whatever you put your attention on, you can get sucked into that project for 7 years or a lifetime. So it better be a good one. And so something like prudence in as a filmmaker, um, and and um, and uh and it also should be a fun one too. Like you don't want to get um you want to play because play is going to be the thing that brings out your best. And there was a lot of play in making the Gerard film. I kind of just I wanted to make it as loose and fun, but also serious. And I think toggling between those two things kind of added to the project. And I always, yeah, even while editing, like there's just a freedom that having 7 years to do it, like I gave myself a lot of freedom to play.
Mhm.
And so I hope that comes out, and I just benefited a lot from it. Yeah, and so like the film, we're planning to get it widely out there. So I think just sharing it, commenting on the trailer right now is a good way to do that. So if you can put that in the link, I appreciate that. If you sign up for the email list at thingshidden.movie, we'll give you updates as we go along, and then there'll be 9 screenings before the end of the year, and we're hoping that the film's out by the end of the year. And even after that, feel free to contact me if you want to host a screening. Um, and there are screenings worldwide being planned at this time. So yeah, I think there's a nice awareness around it, and so but share it, I think would be helpful, and then commenting on it also helps that.
Well, very good. And how can people contact you on the website you mentioned?
Yeah, through the website has a contact page.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time, Sam, and
Dude.
great project and things hit in the movie. Go check it out. It's worth seeing.